I'm Karen Devon of the SFHA. This session aims to give you all kind of simple video skills to help you communicate and connect with your colleagues and your communities online. Today's speaker will be Rosie McIntosh of the Third Sector Lab. I did the intro, but I know we've got a couple of people today who weren't with us the last time. Rosie's Head of Content at Third Sector Lab. They support non-profit organisations to develop and implement effective communication strategies. And Rosie herself has got over a decade of experience in communications. I've got a few bits of housekeeping. This is our first Zoom webinar. So there's a few changes to the last session and a few more ways in which you can interact today. There's a Q&A, so if you'd like to ask any questions during the session, please use the Q&A. There's also a chat function on Zoom, so you can either make a comment to everyone, just to the panelists, or to a particular individual, but be aware all of the comments are part of the record of the day, so they're not private. A recording of today's webinar will also be available, and we will have that on the event page, and we'll also send you the link after the event. The webinar's in 2 parts. Next session is taking place next week, and we'll send you a link to that in a few days. And Rosie will be setting a task for you to do in between the webinars. So without any further ado, I would like to hand you over to Rosie. If there's anything that you need, please use the chat function and enjoy today's session. Thank you very much indeed. Rosie, it's over to you.
Okay. Great, thanks very much. Okay, hello everybody. Especially those of you who had the patience with us last time. Sorry that it's taken us a while to get the technology sorted. It's always a bit embarrassing when that's supposed to be my job. So just to double check with everybody then, can everybody hear me just now? And I guess, I don't know how you'll tell me if you can't. Okay, and just to say, Karen, I need to share my screen, so if you can allow that, that would be good. Great, Marie can hear us, that's great. Okay. And I want to share my sound. Okay, so we're going to make use of this chat function as much as possible. I think like one of the most important things is when we're doing webinars, I prefer to do this kind of thing face to face, probably most of us do, but it can still work really well as a webinar. But one of the important things for that is that we do try to have as much interaction as we can. So don't feel shy about popping up for a question. I might not get to them immediately, but I will get to them at some point. So just to start us off with that then, if you can just say hello and say where you are, that would be really helpful. As Karen said, I'm Rosie, and I'll tell you a wee bit more about myself. So if you pop up in the Q&A and let me know where you are, I think we'll do like what they do at a wedding, and we'll see who's the furthest away. So first of all, let me know if you can hear me. Just a wee yes would be helpful from anybody. No? In the chat, okay. Oh, Anila's here from Glasgow, fantastic. Well, Karen's here from Uddingston. I thought we'd find somebody a wee bit further away than that. Anybody as far away as, oh, Falkirk. Oh, Aberdeen, right, okay, Partick, yeah, Aberdeen, you're winning so far. Oh, Bela, that's a lovely name. Is that a Shetland name? Anybody as far away as that? No. Yeah, Bela's an island in Shetland, isn't it? Oh, Paisley, hi Alan, nice to have you here. Stirling, okay, well, right, Aberdeen's still winning. If anybody's further away from than Aberdeen, I feel a bit like an auctioneer here. Oh, Kelvindale will allow that, yep. Sorry, we could have just been down the Radisson today. Marie and Stirling, nice to see you as well. Okay, right, that's great. Thank you so much for saying hello, and I hope that everybody can hear me okay. If there's any technical challenges, just do pop up in the middle and let us know, and we'll try to take care of that as best we can. Hopefully this is going to be a wee bit easier. Okay. Oh, now showing you just the chat. There we go. So as Karen said, we will share a recording of this webinar, but I'll also share just a link to the slides so that you don't have to watch all the way through the whole thing, and you can just click through and get the information that you need to. I'll go through them just now, see how we get on for time. If there's bits that, if we have loads of interaction, that's great, and it might take a wee bit longer. So it might be that I'll leave you to have a wee look at things for yourself later, but for now I'm planning to go through everything bit by bit. Okay, and we've spoken about this. If you go to the bottom of the page, you'll get the menu bar. Anybody who's not managed that as yet, the little Q&A in the speech bubble, that'll allow you, or the chat, that'll allow you to come up and send chats to everyone. And as Karen said, you can have a chat just with your pal while it's going on, but be aware that those will be recorded as part of the overall record of the event. Okay, so as Karen said, my name's Rosie. I work with Third Sector Lab, and we work with organisations that are not for profit. So sometimes that's public sector, sometimes it's charities, but more and more we've been doing work with housing and housing associations. So I'm definitely not an expert on housing. I'm probably not an expert on video either, but then that's part of what I want to teach, is the fact that you can just pick it up and do it even though you're not necessarily trained in it and having the background in it. It's about what we can do with the equipment that we've got in our pockets and with our skills as communicators. So a few reasons why we might choose to use video. One of them is accessibility. At the moment, that's a really, really important one, because video is just about the only way we can access each other. And that can mean that we're doing like live video content like what we're doing today, as a way of connecting with people when we can't do face-to-face. But it can also mean that we can create little videos and share them for people to engage with separately. So don't get too hung up in thinking that you have to be doing everything live and as a webinar all the time. There's still a lot of value in our video content. So that can give us things like it avoids this sort of what I would call the writing trap. So at the moment, I think we could be a wee bit overwhelmed by information and sort of death by memo. But we want to hear sort of true voices, and the way that you would engage with people when they come into the housing office, we can try to do that through our video content, or the way that you would engage with your staff when you have a get together and a chat. Video can help us to do that. Another reason for using video is that it's entertaining. It can be funny, it can be emotional, and therefore people enjoy watching it. And because they enjoy watching it, they therefore enjoy sharing it and pass it on. So it's a nice skill to be able to have. Another thing is that we know that YouTube is, after Google, the world's second biggest search engine. So we know that there is a whole, I was going to say generation, yeah, probably generation, but you know, people, it cuts across everybody. But there are whole groups of people who will use YouTube as their primary way of finding information. And just as a straightforward way of passing on information that you need your tenants to know, video is a great way to do that. Okay, I'm not seeing questions pop up just now, so I'm assuming that means there aren't any at the moment, but please do just jump in if you need to. Okay, so what makes video for the web special? I don't know how many of you have had previous experience of using video. I certainly was around in the days when you got a video production company in and you spent time doing storyboarding and you went out and filmed in all these different locations, and that was great. But now we're making video, it's for the web, it's kind of hand knitted, and we're getting out as quickly as possible. And there are 3 reasons for that. One is that there's less time and people have more distractions. So I always have this just image of a cat, and I should stick a cat up above my desk, because I know that people are going to go and look at a cat video instead of looking at what it is that I've got to do and think, how do I keep somebody's attention when they could be looking at a cat video? We know it's a broader audience and they've got less kind of prior knowledge, so we have to be more specific and limited in the type of information we're sharing. And we also know that there is that potential for people to share and pass their information on. And that means that we have to think about how those audiences would respond to it. Just checking the questions there. So our key principles, or my key principles anyway, are, this applies to most of our communications, but it particularly applies with video, and that is keep it short. Now, when we say short, we used to say 3 minutes was short. Now I find 3 minutes, but it feels like a long time. Then we said it was about 1.5 minutes. Now I would say a short video is closer to 45 seconds. But I think in the climate that we're in just now, people will watch something that's a little bit longer. So 1.5 minutes is fine. We want to keep it simple. So that means simple in terms of the message, but also in terms of the content. Like, don't try to do anything too fancy in terms of recording and editing. It's much more important that your message is clear. We want to make it useful. So that can be either useful in terms of the information that you pass on, or just that it's useful in that it makes people laugh or it makes them feel connected to their communities. And then make it sharing. Sharey is the worst word ever, but we know that people pass on things that feel relevant to them, things that have an emotional connection, or things that are funny. And this is where I always want to let people know and remind people that you're really, really lucky that you are interesting. You're based in your local communities, you're doing stuff about humans, you're doing stuff that's relevant to people's lives. And there are companies out there that have got the biggest communication budget in the world who would kill to be able to have the interest that you have. So don't forget that. I don't want to be negative, but a few things that can make it a wee bit more difficult, and these are all things that we can overcome. So one of those is editing. I really love editing. I love locking myself away in a room and spending time like going through all things detailed, but that doesn't mean that everybody does it. It takes a lot of practice to get to that stage, and it also takes quite a lot of time. And to be honest, I'm not sure how much advantage there is in it sometimes. What we would try to do is to train people to be able to shoot without having to edit, or without having minimal editing as far as possible. So that's number one. Number two is confidence and consent. Now, I think most of us are familiar with the idea that being sat in front of a camera and ask questions takes some confidence, and that there might be a lack of confidence there. But what I find people are often surprised by when they come to our workshops is that it takes quite a lot of confidence to film people and to ask them questions. And it's just, as with most things, it's really just about getting comfortable with that and building up your confidence. The other side of that is about consent. So if somebody's being filmed and if you're sharing that, you need to make sure that they are able to give consent, that they do give consent, and that they understand how it's being shared. So that's those ones. And then the third one is accessibility. So although I said at the start that film is a really good way for us to create accessible content, we also have to be aware of the accessibility challenges that come with it. Those apply obviously particularly to deaf people, so we need to make sure that we've got subtitles. YouTube is really great for doing that. But also remember, it's not just deaf people. We know that 85% of content that's watched on a mobile phone is watched without the sound. So just being aware of those accessibility issues. None of this is stuff that we can't overcome. It's all just things that we need to be aware of. I'm going to stop at this point just to check with you. Is there anything else that anybody else has found a challenge, or that anybody has thought, I would like to do video, but I've not been able to because of, or I tried and I found this tricky? So I'm going to give you a little bit of typing time there. So I can see the question and answer here. And the chat. Okay. If nobody's sharing challenges that you've had in the past, does that mean that either you've not tried or you just maybe don't know what the challenges are as yet? Okay, I will move on for now then. Sound quality. Okay, yeah, no, that's a really good question from Susie there. It is something that's difficult, and I think sound quality is we always say that sound quality is more important than picture quality. I've got some examples of some kit and things with me here, which I'll hold them up. I might have to switch to my video at that point. And I think that there's technical things that can help us around that, like equipment, microphones and things that you can use. There's also just realizing that it's okay to have subtitles as a support for sound that's not perfect. And then just being able to be in a space that makes it easier. So I have literally recorded voiceovers hiding underneath my bed covers just to give it better sound. Okay, a question from Claire Louise is, you find it difficult to find a platform for editing on a PC rather than a Mac? Okay, I can definitely help you with that. There are lots of things that are available online as well as to have downloaded. So on a PC, even just Windows Movie Maker that comes with a PC can make a big difference. Oh, Karen's got an answer for a question. Is that no, or is that on the PC? So Windows Movie Maker can make all the difference, but most of what I use is online video editing, and we're not going to look at editing in much detail this week, but we will next week. The one that I use most of the time is called WeVideo, and there's a free version of that available online. And it's amazing actually what you can do just on a mobile phone. But yeah, it's hard to negotiate. There's all these different versions of things and everything looks a wee bit different, and editing can just be a bit of a challenge. Just before we move on then, is there anything else that anybody's found to be a challenge? Okay, right, we'll move on just now then. I'll move that out the way. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few different kind of styles of filming. These are not necessarily like proper classifications. This is just kind of how I think about it. So we talk about this sort of social reporting style, and we've often done that like at events as a way of doing an alternative event report, but it would work really well just now. So this is the idea where you have a sort of one person with a camera, a smartphone most likely, and either just putting the camera in your own face or going up to somebody at an event. Some of you might have met us at SFHA events, in fact, doing this, and just asking simple questions that provoke a bit of conversation and getting people's responses to them. So at the moment, it would work really well. We did one for a housing association recently, actually, where their board members just recorded a wee bit on their own webcams at home and shared them that way. So here's an example of that. Now, do let me know if you have any challenges with sound here.
You have to like plan a time to sit down and like know that you're going to talk about death. Usually it's quite an amusing chat. I think it always kind of leads to some kind of humour, right? I think that's the best way that I think British people in particular deal with these situations. But I just want to make sure that everyone understands what I want when I die. And
okay, I'm going to pause it there just to say, while this is playing, please do chip in with your questions and your comments. I really do want to hear what you're thinking about it. So by the time we get to the end of it, maybe there'll be a couple of questions there or a couple of thoughts.
Because I've had cancer for 10 years, I've actually changed my mind quite a lot about what I want in terms of my funeral and stuff. And so if there's something that we might hear on the radio or on TV, I say, oh, that's what I would want, or that's you know, and it's quite easy to just like pick up the conversation and then drop it again throughout life. I don't think you necessarily have to like plan a time to sit down and like know that you're going to talk about death. You can just like put it into your life as you go along, and I think that makes it so much more normal. So yeah, I think it's really helpful.
Okay. So did anybody have any thoughts on that as we were watching it? I'm looking for our chat here. Okay, that's interesting that Alan's said here about having challenges with disabilities and long-term needs and leaflets having to be easy read. Yep, and that's a really important point when we have video as well. We need to make sure it is as easy read as possible and as accessible as possible. Oh. My screen sharing is paused. Resume share. Sorry about that. Oh. Okay. If nobody's got any thoughts on that, then I will tell you my thoughts for now. So one of my favourite things about that, and one of the reasons that I like to share it, is because it's such a difficult topic. And I think it's quite impressive that they've managed to find something and share it in a kind of light and easy way, because there's somebody who's human and engaging. And that means that she's then able to talk about something that's as difficult a topic as that, and done in a respectful and dignified way. I also really like the fact that they have the subtitles along the bottom and the use of colour there and the use of bold. Has anybody ever done anything along those lines before? Anybody done something that you'd like to share? Yep. Okay, Anila's saying how much it sounded really genuine and that it would connect with people, and I think that's a really big thing actually. I think the fact that people want to hear a voice that sounds like it's real, and sometimes we want to have like the most professional sounding or most authoritative, and I don't know what your organisations are like, but sometimes the chief executive wants to make sure that they can say the things that they want to say, but actually often the connection and the genuine stuff comes from having conversations with real people, probably most often tenants and community members. Okay, I'm going to go back here because I missed one. So another option with video and that kind of, particularly that kind of social reporting style video that works really well is when we have live video. So obviously that's what I'm doing at the moment. We're doing this Zoom stuff, and then we can use things like House Party and things like Teams, and you can do that in a kind of formal video way. But the other way is that obviously you can create live video and share it through your social media channels. So I have done Facebook Live webinars before. I've done them privately within groups. So if you've got a Facebook group within your community or within your housing association, then you can do a live webinar within that and have the comments below. And one of the good things about live video compared to pre-recorded video, you know, there's risks that come with live video. It can be a technical challenge, but the good thing is that people get a notification to say that you are now live, and that'll get a lot more attention than you would get just by posting a video. You can also do IGTV on Instagram, so you get up to an hour of video there, or you can do YouTube live streaming. And I think the important thing there is not all like, let's find the best platform or whatever it is. The most important thing is finding out where your audiences are and then going to that space and using it. Okay. I'm going to show you another example of video. So we usually think about video as that, what we just saw before there, somebody sitting in front of a camera and chatting, but there's different ways to do it. So even if you just take some photographs or encourage people to send in some photographs, it's probably the way we do it just now. And then we can put sound over it. And the sound can either be, you could record a voiceover, or you can just put some music over it and then put the images together. That creates a really easy to make, quite professional looking video that doesn't have too much of a challenge as far as sound quality goes. Here's an example that we did before. We think we did this one using, no, we did this one using Biteable, and we'd ask people to write signs. I found that when we put the signs together, they weren't that easy to read, so we also wrote it out. So if anybody's got any thoughts on this, as I say, while it's playing, please do chip in and share what you want to say. So does anybody have any thoughts on that one? I'm just going to have a look in this Q&A, sorry. Nope. Okay, so something like that is dead simple. Next week, I will show you how technically we would do something like that. But the important thing is just having some nice pictures and putting them together, and it's very, very simple. I'm just going to, yeah. So Anne, me and Alan both like it. It's a nice way to get people involved, and there is something about not having too much focus on the individual and having it more of a kind of community effort that works well. And but it's not, whereas the one before, that was her kind of bearing her soul and telling her whole story. This is just people chipping something in, and it's a nice way to involve people. I like that style, it's pretty. I think if I ever hear that kind of music again, it'll be too soon, but that's just because I do too much of that. Okay, so something that can work really well is time lapses and stop motion. I found this one, which is it's from America, but it's a housing example, which I really like. And I have used, I mean, my kids do time lapse video, they're like 6 and 8. So you can do it on something really as simple as just like if you take photos on your phone, and then like I have an Android phone and Google automatically produces little collages for me. So it can be that simple, or you can do it fancy on the camera. So let's just have a little look at this one. I'll just get to this chat. Okay. Oh, it's in Leeds. I love watching things like this. My kids would say it's very satisfying. So as you can see, they've just taken it from a picture from the same point at several points in the day, put it all together and speeded it up. It's really quite impressive. And it keeps going and going and going. Lovely. Time for the roof. Oh. So I don't know about anybody else, but I absolutely love that video because I love the fact that it all came together in the end. I think if I was going to do that, and if I was, especially if it was a housing association, at the end of that, I would want to see a happy person with their keys moving in, because I think that's the important part. Yeah, and I'm saying it's great for something for developments. People love seeing that stuff happen, and seeing how things have changed. And as I said, if I had a picture of somebody, somebody at the end moving in, that would be great. The other thing I would love to see is like, what did it look like 50 years ago? I know that people particularly enjoy things like that. I love looking at pictures of, like, I lived in New Gorbals Housing Association for years, and I love looking at the old pictures of the Gorbals before those houses went up. So that kind of thing can work really well. It can also work really well for things like events, or if you've got a community garden and you want to show it throughout the year in all different weathers and things like that. That's stuff that people share and love. Okay, look at another example. Okay, right, I love this one, and I'll make sure that the sign's not onto the live for you. So I was telling Karen yesterday that I was doing a workshop recently with a wee community group in North Glasgow, and it was all volunteers who were there and looking at video skills. And I went round at the start and asked people, you know, have you done video before? Have you used a mobile phone before? And all the rest of it. And people had a mixed level of skills. And then I got to this woman, Anne, and said, you know, have you used video before? Have you worked? And she said to me, well, there was that one time that I went viral. So this is where Anne went viral. So they were in the street and some music was playing, and some of the women from their community group started dancing, and this is what they shared.
So I can see a lot of white discharge, honey.
Okay, apologies for Facebook's immediate videos going up after that there. Okay, so my favourite thing about that video, as you can see, the BBC picked it up, they then shared it, they then were part of a documentary with Darren McGarvey, the rapper, and they then ended up getting funding, which came through for that group. Now, my favourite thing about that is that they didn't go in and make a video and say, older people in Glasgow face social isolation and we have been providing a community group. They just got out in the street and danced, and they captured the feeling about it and they captured the fun about it, and that's what made it work. Has anybody seen that video before, out of interest? Because apparently there's 5 million people have watched that, which amazes me. Yeah, so Alan's seen it before. It's great, and as you say, fun is the most important thing in a video like that. It's great. I really enjoyed it, and when I met them, they were excellent. Loved those women. So I think that's something that's really important just now as well. Is if we're going to do stuff that's about connecting people and getting them together, then I'd love to see, it's not about, oh, can people do a perfect TikTok dance, or are people using their spare time to learn Mandarin? It's just, are people dancing about their kitchen and messing up making hot cross buns? Okay. Another way of doing kind of video is taking audio and putting it together with still images. So somebody said that sound quality can be a bit of a challenge, and it can. But what's most difficult, I think, is getting video and audio to work together. And there are good ways to record audio, just even on your computer. So here is an example of just some audio. Some people seem to think about audio as like a kind of poor cousin of video. I don't think that. I find audio really intimate. So here is Sheila's story.
It's tremendous feeling after all these years, because I've pretty much always been registered blind. I could never go into a bookshop and buy books. I guess all my life, though you don't miss it, you wish you could have had the opportunity. So now in my 60s, after all these years, I can actually buy any book that a sighted person can buy and read it and enjoy it. The course itself was great. You were able to have hands-on with someone there beside you. Otherwise, you're sitting at home frightened to touch the machine. I was given notes in a format that I could read. I was given Braille notes to take home. I'm not frightened of it. And as I say, I've blossomed out into music, shopping channels, all sorts of things. I'm so thrilled with the opportunity. My world has opened up, and I'm so glad I've lived in this era now.
Okay, any thoughts on Sheila's story? I love Sheila, and I love the fact that we did that one using audio, and Yeah, it's lovely, Marie said. I just find it so intimate, and I feel like I connect so much with her voice compared to, you could make a really complicated video and I don't think it would have more emotional impact than just hearing somebody talk. And I think obviously the fact that she is blind as well means that using a format that works for her felt like it was the right thing to do in that place. If you're sharing things on social media, you can record audio and then create subtitles to go with it as well, so that people can access it that way as well, and obviously so that deaf people can access it. But it's just it can be a really powerful way of doing things. With audio, I think it has to be, well, it can go two ways actually. It has to be either really short, so I think under a minute to keep people's attention, or you can record a full-on 45-minute podcast if it's interesting enough, and then people can listen to it in the background while they're doing other things. Okay, animation's another option. So again, I'll show you some options of this next week. This is a kind of complicated version, but I wanted to share it because we did it for a housing association and because it was so effective. So you can either record people's voices, or you can just have a clear message and you can share it through animation. Even a lot of the government coronavirus stuff has been done through animation, just to keep the message as clear and as simple as possible. So I'll show you this one just now. Feel free to chip in with comments.
My name's Claire Newton and I've been involved for the past probably 40 years. But my flat was built 41 years ago. It was one street of 42 houses and we were a housing society. We are offered training so that we can make decisions for the association. The senior staff and all the staff are very supportive of the board. I've learned such a lot. I've been to a lot of places I would never have been to if I hadn't been a member. I'd like to see some younger people volunteering. Very good for your CV if you're working, to say you're doing something voluntary. There's an induction. It gives you a chance to find out what it's going to be like, to come along and just be an observer.
Okay, did anybody have any thoughts on that? Okay, somebody's asking questions about time lapse. I will answer them after. Going between the chat and the Q&A. Yeah, it's really nice to hear somebody who's using that service. And animation can work really well because it can be, Claire's identified there. And she's, you know, her voice is there, but it's kind of different from maybe being shown on film. Okay, somebody's saying you would suggest doing something like that to your board. Right, wait till you hear how successful that was, or maybe I've got it up on my screens because I was that excited about it. That housing association got 9 applications from tenants to their board after that. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, well, what were the figures on it? 9, okay. And they were all just saying to me, no, you have no idea, 9 applications from tenants was great. And I'm guessing that all of you know the same, that it can be really difficult to get people to do that. And that they ended up with a more diverse board as a result, which is great. I found it really engaging. That one was done by Amanda, who's on our team. So a little bit more complicated to do, but there are lots of ways of doing animation that is much more simple than that, and it would still work really well. Oh yeah, I think you should share that at your next governance conference, 100%. We also did one for them about, and this one, like this is like I can geek out over housing association boards and governance with this group in a way that after looking with others. They did one because they changed the structure of their board. And obviously it's really important to share the fact that you're changing the structure of your board, and that's really important information for your tenants, but it's also really boring in the nicest possible way. So we did an animation for that just to make it a wee bit more engaging and share it. And then people were much more engaged with the process than they would have been otherwise. I really love animation as a way of presenting things. I think sometimes people think that means sitting and making clay models and changing things and doing tiny little details, but there are so many tools available now, like Biteable and like that one Beyond, Powtoons, that can make it much more simple and take a wee bit of playing around with and practice, but that it's really helpful still. And I love it. It works really well, and I will show you how to do that next week. Okay. So we'll do that next week. I'm not going to show you that one just now. You can have a wee look at that one if you'd like to. The other thing I would say is apps that are just on your phone can be really great for creating video. And I'm not going to go into any great detail about that just now. And certainly not show you the sort of how-to, although I do have some slides here on how to create Instagram stories. I do have some stuff here about charities using TikTok, and the app that I've had on my phone recently that I found really helpful. It has a watermark on it, but you can pay for a new one. It's InShot, because that's really simple. My kids have been using that to make videos. I think my point here is less about, oh, this is what you should use, and more, do you know what, see if you make Instagram stories in your private life, or see if the people that you work with engage with Instagram stories, then that should be the way to do it. So it's not about saying this is the best platform, it's about saying what are you most comfortable with and what would people actually engage with. Okay, one last example then is if you get really fancy, and I'm not saying this is a really fancy example, but you can film people, you can film interviews, you can then use editing footage to put things together with editing software, to put your footage together, add pictures, add music, and create something. So this is the last example that I'll show you just now.
This is all stuff that I wouldn't be able to do if I wasn't earning the living wage. I wouldn't be able to take my kids out on a day trip. I wouldn't be able to have that date night with my partner. I wouldn't be able to budget for my travel to come into work. Like, it's a massive impact. It makes a big difference to someone's life. I'm a corporate parent and admin assistant with Who Cares Scotland now. So it's the first job I've been employed with actually that's provided the living wage rather than the minimum. I think it makes you want to work harder. I think you feel a wee bit more appreciated within your work, because you're confident, you know you're proud, you feel proud. Childcare wise, I've been in a minimum wage job before previously, and I had to quit my job because I wasn't able to survive on the wage that I was getting. My children don't deserve to be excluded because their mum can't afford to pay for a school trip because she doesn't earn enough in her job. That's not my children's fault. Jaden has a lot of energy, so it's good to be able to take him to like a soft play or a park or out for the day just to burn that energy off, because I feel he would get quite stressed and agitated and all if he was just stuck in the house all day. A wee handful, but he's brilliant. They're really good. They're good kids. I've been lucky. We love a caravan holiday. We usually do a caravan holiday. We do it with the Sun Holidays, so it works out a bit cheaper again. So it's all about kind of saving and budgeting and having the extra there to be able to save and budget to do those kind of things. Kids love it, and that's the thing. That's what's worth it, to see the smile on their face. That's what motivates you to come into work.
Okay. Did anybody have any thoughts on that one? Okay, one of the reasons that I wanted to show you that one, yeah, the film, somebody saying, Susie's saying it depends on having a staff member who's articulate and engaging. Absolutely it does. And the music's quite nice to go along with it. I like that one. That one, yes, finding the right person to interview is really, really important. It doesn't always have to be a staff member. It can be somebody who's in your community. You might find that sometimes it's people who don't work in that field, or who maybe aren't particularly senior but are really good at doing that stuff, and it's just finding those people. What was interesting with that one for me was two things. One was being asked to make a video about the living wage, and they wanted us to do one about how they calculate the living wage, and I just felt that was not going to be as interesting for people as what's actually important, the actual human side. And the other thing is that we just filmed the interview with her, and all the other content that was in there, all those other photographs and videos, she just WhatsApped over to me. And I was able to put over the top of it. So that's what I would like to sort of alert you, that you don't have to go and capture and create every single piece of content that you do. As long as you have permission to do it, then you can put things together that people have shared with you and things that have been done in the past and stuff that you get as stock from online. So just checking the chat here. Yeah, I think that was quite emotional, that one. Oh, so I don't want to share any more screens. There we go. I think sometimes the emotional impact of a video can be like the most important thing. And we do, I mean, I do full days of training specifically on working with case studies and telling the individual stories, and I've never fully decided what I think about these things, and it's something that I think we just need to challenge ourselves on over and over again, is that I think that video could have been quite sad and could have been like not very dignified had we made it at the point when she was struggling, but I think at the point that she had got them at the living wage, and it made all that difference. So when you're thinking about doing something emotional, it's like, well, what is the emotion that we're striking here? And you want it to be at a point where somebody has something more positive. Okay, so I've scheduled in a wee break for us here because I want us to get up, stretch our legs and all the rest of it, but there's a couple of things I want to look at first. One is equipment. So nobody's expecting anybody to have a whole load of professional kit. If you have it in your office, that's great, but even if you don't, that's fine. But while we're at home, if we're lucky, we've got a smartphone. So you can use your phone. Most phones these days have got better cameras on them than the fancy digital cameras that I had a few years ago. We've spoken about sound quality already, but there are most phones again will have pretty good sound quality if you're in a quiet room, but you might like to think about buying a microphone that plugs into your phone, so you can get special ones that plug in. I have a Rode one and I have an iRig one. And they plug in particularly to my phone. But I've also put a link here to a little adapter that you can use to plug in any microphone to your phone. The other things that you can use is, again, I've put a link here just to Gorilla tripods, which are about £15 and that you can use to clip onto your phone. There's nothing wrong with a bit of sugary camera work, that's fine, but it makes a difference if you just pop your phone down and chat into it, or just to use the camera that's in your laptop as well. And that's all we're using for these sessions. And the other thing that I have is a ring light, so I can use that if I'm in poor light. That my entire kit, like not including my phone, was about £50. So what you might want to consider is having that in your office and allowing people to take them out. Has anybody had any challenges with kit, or does anybody not like the kit that you've used at work? No. Okay, so there's links in this presentation here which I will share, so if there's anything that anybody wants to go out and get. Okay, so before we go for our break, I know that sounds funny, but I'm going to just go through quickly a few things about asking questions. And sometimes these are questions that you would even ask yourself if you're going to be filming yourself. Or questions that you would ask of other people. You want to keep your videos as conversational as possible, and it feels a bit silly that I'm telling you how to have a conversation, but here are my kind of top tips for that. So when you interview somebody, introduce yourself, explain what it is that you're doing, discuss the kinds of questions that you'll be asking. But what I would say, don't plan the responses and don't sit and write a script, because that can come across a wee bit robotic. I think if you're friendly and you're interested, then that will come across in your video and that will improve what you get. That was me interviewing somebody about how to make Nigerian donuts, which were amazing. We've spoken about this already, but keep it simple. So let's avoid our jargon and all our alphabet soup, and keeping the language and the concepts as simple as possible. I always imagine my dad watching my videos. You'll have somebody else who's the same person that's like, what is your job again? So imagine them watching it. Talk around the topic. So sometimes we think, oh, we're going to do a video about this and this is our campaign and that's it. But actually what you're doing is you're interviewing a person, and you're interviewing them about an issue and what's important to them. So it's thinking like, what is the perspective that that individual brings to it? It's not saying what's the message that I want them to say. Examples can make a big difference. So asking people like, what's the best thing that's happened? What's the worst thing? Do you have any top tips? What advice would you give to somebody in the same situation? And always asking, well, how do you feel about it? So it's not just about recounting facts. I think it's okay to be a wee bit provocative and make people think. So don't just let them just kind of trot out the line. So say if you're doing a wee video about a food delivery project in your area, you don't just say, well, how many packages have you delivered? You say, you know, what would people notice if your project disappeared tomorrow? You'll get a much more interesting answer. Don't forget, I am always really, really happy and delighted and privileged when somebody agrees to be interviewed. So I sometimes forget that it can be an advantage for them as well. So a lot of people, it's never going to occur to them that anybody's interested in what they've got to say. And this is actually their opportunity to do it. So what I would say is, you know, what would you do differently if you had the power? Who do you think needs to know? What do you wish that people knew? And sometimes you can record that and then tag that person in. So I've seen people who've said, oh, this is a message for the First Minister, this is a message for the young people in the community, or whatever it is. If you get stuck with structure, then a really nice way to structure things is always just past, present and future. So it's what has your experience been? What's changed and how are things now? And then what are your dreams and hopes and fears for the future? Or what would you do differently in the future? And that just kind of splits it up nicely. All this within your 90 seconds, of course. And another question that I find really helpful is just, is there anything else you'd like to tell us? And actually, it's amazing how often I will record a whole interview and then I'll ask at the end, is there anything else you'd like to tell us? And at that point, the person just relaxes and tells me, and I delete the whole interview and I only use that part because it ends up being the best. That question here. Okay, so at this point, it's at 11:21 now. I'm going to say get up and walk around, get a drink, go to the toilet if you need to, whatever it is, and come back. Let's say like we'll start again at 11:25. The reason that I want to do this is we've then got like 35 minutes that's quite kind of intense and more based around how to do things. So I want you to have fresh brains for that part. When we're away, if there's any more questions, if there's anything that anybody wants to add, then please do, and I'll do my best to answer that in the meantime. And I'll stop sharing my screen for just now then. Okay, I'll see you in 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay. So I hope everybody's had the chance to get up and have a walk and all the rest of it. We've got about half an hour left. I hope that everybody's back. I'm sure that you are. Let me see. Great, thank you, Karen. So where we're going to go from here is have a wee think about some more practical things. And as Karen said at the start, I'm going to set you a task for the end of the day. I don't want to call it homework because I don't like to think about it that way. But when we do these workshops face to face, then we'll be doing a lot of practical work, and I would be involved and I'd be helping you and be working in groups and all the rest of it. Obviously, it's not possible for us to do it that way just now. So I'm afraid you're getting all this kind of examples thrown at you and how to and all the rest of it just now. And then between this week and next week, you can try and do some of the practical stuff, and then I will try and feed back on it next week. So please do share what you do. So my biggest advice on the sort of how to is to think about planning your film. And there are lots and lots of different ways that you can structure your film. It could be done in any order. And sometimes when you're just doing a quick chat to camera, you're thinking that there isn't that structure there, but I promise you it always is. So there are 4 things that we always want to show. So usually there will be a problem. We don't want to get to kind of bog down in that, but there'll be something that we need to change. So that might be that people don't understand their rights to benefits, or it could be that people aren't paying their rent, or it could be that there's litter being dropped in your community, whatever it is. And then we have an intervention, and in some cases that's something that you've done or you want to do, or something that you want people to do. So that's the thing that could change things. And then we have the impact, and that's how things are now or how things could be if that intervention was made. And then we have the so what, and that's the sort of human bit that we want to get across. So it's, why does it matter? What's the human impact of that? What's the resonance? Why is that relevant to people's lives? And whenever you're making a film, it's a good idea to come back to this structure and just think, have I identified clearly what the problem is? Have I identified clearly what can be done to change that, the intervention? Have I shown how things have changed, and have I made people care about it? And good luck doing that all in 45 seconds, but I promise you it can be done. The other thing that you need to do is think about what the ingredients that will go within your film. So all the examples that we've shown there, I've tried to break it down as far as possible and show the different ingredients that have been included there. So some of them included audio, interviews, voiceover, music, and they've all included that in some way. Some of them have included visuals, so that can be either a moving film of the person talking at that time, or it can be footage of something else and somebody talking over that, or it can be photographs. It could be photographs you've taken or photographs the person's taken, or it could be graphics which you could create and download, or it could be drawings that you take a photograph of, or it could be moving graphics in the form of animation. And again, you see that these different things have been combined together. And then the third element, so you've got your audio, you've got your visuals. Third element is that you would have, or you might have, some sort of text element. So you could have subtitles, you could have animated text, you could have question cards. So that could be, for example, you could flash up on the screen a graphic of the question, or you could have something that somebody's actually written down and they hold up. Again, as with most things related to film, simple is better. So you think about, what are the ingredients that I have? Where am I going to get them? What technology do I have available to do it? We get to add the extra fun challenge at the moment of the fact that we can't work with people face to face, but I promise you can still find these ingredients. So when you're planning, go back to here, check what the story is, what the structure is, and then think, what are the ingredients that I have available to me to present that? Checking for chat. Okay. The other challenge, and we did touch on this very slightly, so you've got your structure, you've got your ingredients. The next thing is thinking, do we have people? And you don't always have to have that. Sometimes it's just a straightforward piece of information and a message, but something that has a human engagement will always be more effective. So we have to have a little think about the sort of consent and ethics that come with that. So if you're working with somebody, particularly somebody that is a tenant or a community member, or somebody that's benefited from one of the projects that you run, then we have to make sure that we have their consent. So we always get a form signed, and I've put a link here to a form, but I'm sure you have your own consent procedures. But for me, just like straightforward getting the signed form is not enough. So there's two things. One is that you have to make sure that when the person's given consent, that it's informed consent. And that means that they are consenting to be filmed, or saying, actually, I'm happy to have my voice recorded, but I'm not happy to have my face shown, or I'm happy to give my first name, but I'm not happy to give my full name. And everybody will have a different take on that. And then the other thing is that they have to understand how it will be used. So somebody might be happy to be filmed, and then I've filmed people before, and then they've joked at the end, oh, you're not going to put this on YouTube, are you? And I thought, well, that's exactly what I'm going to do, yes. So you have to make sure that they are able to understand where it will be shared, and the fact that it could be passed on through third parties. A lot of people are much happier with that than I might expect them to, but it's just being clear. And those of you who have done a lot of GDPR training will know that it's really explicit in GDPR that how and where it will be shared has to be made clear. The other element that comes along with consent is this idea of capacity, and there's no straightforward answer on that either. There's no people have capacity and don't have capacity. You could have the capacity to make certain decisions in certain situations if you're informed enough, and not in others. So it's interesting that at the moment, I want to talk about care homes and things. If you work with people who have learning disabilities, mental health problems, or dementia, it might be the case, or young people, it might be the case that somebody else would give consent on their behalf, but you would still have to make sure that that person was happy to be filmed. So it might be that, you know, there's a big difference between using a photograph of a group of older people playing bingo, or talking about their personal care, for example. So it's just being clear about that. Has anybody had any challenges with consent or ethics? I'll give you a little moment there just to chip in if you have. Okay, fairly straightforward. The other thing that's important to me is, once you've had a consent form signed, somebody might be happy for you to use it, but it's just being aware of the time of that as well. And there's no like explicit laws or rules about that as such. But I would say have a clear policy on how long you would use somebody's image for. So somebody might have their picture taken, and you have that picture on your website and you keep it there, and that's great. But if you then decided that you were going to do a big campaign and their photograph was going to be the one that was on the front cover of your leaflet, then I don't think that would be appropriate. So I would go back and check with them, and even just to check the person's still alive sometimes has been an issue for me. So when you go to do an interview with somebody, then obviously you want to make sure that they understand what's expected and what's going to be involved in it. I would, I use this term, so I would probe but not push. So you want to encourage people to share their experiences, but you don't want to do it in a way that makes them just back off. Again, we've said be clear about how and where you'll share the story. And I think something about that, as well as letting them see the benefit of their story being shared. So it's saying this is somebody that you would share with other people who are in the same situation. And so Claire, the board member there who shared her story to try and recruit other people, she was delighted to do that, and because it was done in such a positive way. And that is the important thing, is that the person's in control of their own story. And that applies to people right across the board. So obviously it applies to vulnerable tenants who might be sharing their story, but it might just be that you've got a modern apprentice who's sharing their story of what they've learned in the office, and you would apply the same kind of elements of control in respect to that as you would with anything else. We have a lot of conversations about whether or not to identify people, and we know that the more human something is, the greater the impact of it is. But that doesn't mean that somebody has to be like completely, they don't, first of all, people don't have to tell their whole story, they don't have to give their whole name. I would always give a name, even if it's a false one, because somebody's more likely to identify with somebody called Jane than somebody who's a woman. But there are lots of ways of being a wee bit creative about it these days. And it used to be when my background was working in press offices, and it was always journalists, and they always wanted a photograph and a full name and an address and all the rest of it. Now we have much more control, and I've worked with people on really difficult, complicated topics, things about abuse and all the rest of it, where people have been happy to tell their story and have their voice heard and use their first name, but then we've used animation over the top, for example, or the example that I showed you there of all the different people holding up their signs. People have been happy to give consent to be part of a group thing, but not something that's just about them. So it does, there are things that go in between somebody being identified or not. So the next element of that is that when you're telling somebody's story, you want to make sure that it's positive. And we use this term a lot, we want to have positive stories, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's, again, a bit more complicated than that. So I want something to be positive in the sense that I want to present a solution. But I don't think that's the same thing as just being kind of happy clappy. I know that there are lots of people, particularly at the moment, who are struggling, who are finding things hard. And sometimes just presenting nothing except positive stories can be a wee bit disrespectful because it doesn't make people feel heard. So sometimes I think there can be something positive in telling a difficult story because it makes people feel like their stories are real and being shared. And for me, the best way to do that is to work with people to tell their own stories. So one of the big pieces of work that I work on is I manage a project called Mind Waves, which is people who have mental health problems, and they share their stories and their experiences, and we train them up to do that for themselves. So I think in the past, when I've been working within places I've been worried about, I've been protective over people, and actually when I've worked with people to co-produce their own stories, we've been able to get around that because I've realised that people want to share their own stories, and when they're in control of it, it's a completely different thing from me just walking in and recording it for myself. I hope that makes sense. We spoke about this with the video that I showed you earlier, with people holding up their signs. Sometimes a collaborative case study can work really well. So the example I've got here is, this one came from Women's Aid, and obviously everything that they do is really confidential. So what they've done is they've taken a collaboration of phone calls to their helpline and put them together and turned it into a shared case study. Now I've done that with working with young people who were young carers and wouldn't want to identify any of them individually, but I've asked all of them, what's one thing that you would want people to know about being a young carer, and compiled them together. And then because it's being put out as a group, it's less exposing for the individual. Has anybody had any challenges with anything like that, with telling people's individual stories? Feel free to chip in if you have, and I'll come back to that. Next point that I think is just really important and really simple is just to make sure that you always say thank you to somebody for being filmed. So whether that's your colleague or a tenant or a board member or whoever it is, just let them know the difference that they've made, follow up, send them a link. I have done things like, obviously nobody should ever be out of pocket for taking part in something that you do, but I've done things like bring biscuits to people, sent them flowers. In the past we have done we've done photographs with families which we've used on the website or used in films, and then I've given them copies of the pictures from themselves, so they've got nice family photos. So there are different ways of doing that, some of which are relevant just now, some of which would be a bit more difficult, but it might be that you send people equipment, and as you know, as part of it, that they get to keep that. On safety and ethics, what I would say is there are times when you would say no. So If somebody doesn't want to share their story, then clearly they get to decide that. But there are some times when people will say that they do want to talk and they do want to be on film, and you realise actually it's not appropriate. So anytime there's any sort of safety risk to that person or to other people, then don't do it. Anytime there's an ongoing legal case, we are bound by exactly the same rules as the press. So if there's an ongoing legal case, you just can't talk about it. And I also think there's something to be said for like just the sort of feeling in your water that it's just not quite right. Sometimes you just think it's not going to work. And what I would say is just put it aside, and you can always come back to it and do it later if you think that things might improve. Has anybody had any examples of that? Anybody, I don't know if you're all quiet here because you've not done it or because you're thinking, oh, this is far too complicated to explain. I'll pause there for a second just so anybody can chip in if there's something that you have found a challenge. Okay, well, my golden rule then is do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. I say my golden rule as if I made that one up and as if it's not like the central tenet of every world religion, the golden rule. But it's not the same thing as saying, you know, do what you would do. Everybody's different. And I personally am not somebody who would want to share my story. We tend to be quite private, but there are lots of people who are delighted to, especially if they think it could change things. So before I send you away to do your task, I'm going to give you some really kind of nuts and bolts advice on how to record and upload video. And I hate doing this just through a screen at you, but you've got these here so you can come back to them and look at them later, because what I'll guarantee you is you're not going to learn how to do it by me telling you. You're going to learn how to do it by going away and playing. And I want you to try next week to record about 30 seconds of video. And I would say if you could commit 30 minutes to that, if you could manage half an hour between now and then in that time you'll have figured out how to record 30 seconds of gold. So it does take a wee bit of time, it takes a wee bit of playing around. So my first tip is find a quiet corner. I know that's not always easy just now, particularly if you've got a house full of people. Finding a quiet space can be a bit of a challenge. A quiet space is a different thing from a silent space. Okay, so when we're at events and things, I always say there's nothing wrong with a wee bit of background noise. In fact, it's a good idea to have a bit of buzz. I also feel like just now, finally, I've worked from home for years and I've often had my children around, and I've always had to like pretend that they don't exist, and if they come into shot then that's the worst possible thing. At the moment, that's all changed. So as I say, find a quiet space, but it doesn't have to be silent. If you find that your kids run past in the background or your cat's there or whatever, that's fine. So it's just so you can be heard. This is like an overstatement, an understatement saying, think about light. And those people who are photographers understand that I can't just explain this in 1 minute. But one thing to just be conscious of is if you want the light to be coming towards the person's face, you don't want it to be behind their head. Otherwise you'll get this sort of silhouetted outline of a person, which is not helpful. You want to hold your phone, unless you're doing a Snapchat or you're doing an Instagram story or a TikTok, and I'll be very impressed if you do that. But otherwise, if you're doing just a normal YouTube video, then you hold your phone sideways in landscape mode. So the longest part of your phone is horizontal. Otherwise, you'll get these lines down the side that this guy's got here. I've used that as an example because that was me that did it as part of my actual job. So don't be surprised if you do end up doing it. You want to hold your phone so that you are filming the person's head and shoulders. Now I'm saying the person, it might be you, or you might not film a person at all. You might just use photographs or something. So just their head and shoulders. And one of the reasons for that is because so many people will watch it just on a mobile phone, and otherwise their face will be really small. It's amazing when you watch a video how much you rely on lip reading. So you want to be able to see the person's expressions and you want to be able to see their mouth moving. Sometimes people want to film with a lot of context. They want to get a banner in the background and all the rest of it. That's very difficult to do. So as I said, focus head and shoulders, and if it's slightly off center, then that works better because it's less like a mugshot. The choice about what angle to film from is partly to do with vanity, and it's partly to do with dignity. So you don't want to be looking down on people because it can make them look a wee bit pitiful, and most people don't want a camera to be looking up at them. In terms of whether you want to have it, so there's different choices. You could either have somebody looking straight down the camera, and that's the kind of YouTuber way of doing it. I think it takes a little bit of confidence to be able to do that, but that works really well. The other alternative is to just put your phone down off to the side and talk across the camera, and that can work really well as well. So what I would suggest with this, as with most things, is play around and find what works for you. So as I said, it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of a shake in your camera work. That's really not the end of the world. If you've got a tripod, that's great. If you've got a Gorilla tripod, that's great. If you can just prop your phone up on a stand or use an iPad stand or something like that, that's great. But another option is just to be able to use your elbows. So even just putting your elbows down on the table and holding your phone that way will give it less shake, or even pulling your elbows into your side and holding it will make it better. When you double tap on the screen when you're filming, then you'll see the full screen, the way that it'll appear when at the end. And if you tap on the person's face, then it'll pull, I keep saying the person's face, you could be filming anything. You might be out in your garden filming your flowers. I'd love to see that. But whatever it is that you tap on, that will be pulled into focus. And this is the joy of phones, like say trying to do that on a proper camera. I would say aim for one take. So we're not thinking, oh, I'll do all this editing to it, because that's too hard. So anyone who's ever done liquid eyeliner will understand you're best to do it in one go. If you make a mistake, just start again. It's not about trying to hodgepodge it together. And then working clips. So if you're filming something, if no more than a minute, 45 seconds is better. If you ask somebody a question and they take 45 seconds to reply, and it's a good answer, that's great. I would just press stop. And then if I've got more to ask them, then I will record again, use it as a separate clip. So if you've got little clips, you can always patch them together. If you've got a huge bit of footage, it'll be harder to upload, it'll be harder to edit. So bite-sized pieces. And then before you go, number one, check that it's worked. There are many better people than me, more professional people than me. It has happened to me with people from the BBC before, have come out, recorded an interview, gone back to their office, and then had to phone me and tell me that they forgot to press record. So these things happen. So just check that it worked. Make sure that you've got your consent form signed. Probably you're not going to get a consent form signed this week, but when you're working on it, always make sure you do before they go away. And then that's it. It's time for your premiere. So in the next week, and ideally I'd like if you could do it before Tuesday, because if you send them before Tuesday, I'll share the details of how to do that. What we'll do is we'll just create a Dropbox that you can upload to. And it would be nice to see as many as possible. Probably won't be able to show 17, but it would be good to get some examples. Try and create a 30-second clip. Now, the topic that I'd like to look at is, what does home mean to you? Obviously, that's relevant to your jobs. It feels very relevant to everyone's lives just now. If you want to talk to camera and record yourself, then that would be great. Or you could interview somebody else in your house or your dog. Or if you want, you don't have to use any interview at all. You can just write things down, you can create graphics, you can put things together, whatever you like. I'm not looking for anything professional. I'm not looking for anything particularly fancy, but I'd love to see you just play around, use the advice that's in here and share it. And then next week we can have a look at how we take that raw material and turn it into something a little bit more professional. Here's my advice: quiet corner, landscape portrait, share it by Tuesday. In the meantime, I'm more than happy for you to email me if you've got any questions. I'm more than happy for you to tweet me. I'm happy for it to go through Karen and Molly if that's easier. Before I sort of set you free to do that, has anybody got any questions about it? and I will stay here for a while. So if you're done, then that's fine. But if you've got questions, then do pop up. And please don't feel that I'm putting pressure on you. I understand what it's like to, I'll say, those are my children who are now much bigger than that. But I know how complicated life is at the moment, so don't feel that there's pressure on you to do it. And if you're not able to, then obviously very, very welcome to come back to next week's session without having done it. But I would really like to see some people share something. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, then I will pass back to Karen. And as I say, I'm more than happy to take questions this week. So thank you so much for all of you, for especially those of you who joined in there. And please do give us any feedback before next week and we'll try and apply that. But thanks very much then.
Thanks, Rosie, that was fantastic. So what we'll do is the second session's taking place at 2:30 next Thursday. We'll send everybody a link to the webinar, so you don't need to re-register for that session. We'll also send everybody the slides. We'll also separately send a link to the recording, and within the slides will be Rosie's contact details as well. So I really enjoyed that. I might even have a go at trying to do something myself, my first video. So I hope you all have a good week. If there is anything at all, what we'll also put on there is my email address, Molly's email address, and our mobile numbers. So if you do need anything, or you've got a question or anything at all, don't hesitate to get in touch. And just really to reiterate, to say thank you very much indeed for Rosie. And I look forward to seeing everybody next Thursday.